Hello, everybody. I'm just starting this now. My name is Pastor Shawn Hill, and I'm here to tell you my story about going from being an atheist to now being a pastor. So that's what this video is titled, and I know my friend Jonathan, uh, put out something for people to see, and it's really cool, and I'm just absolutely excited to see how this goes. Um, but yeah, I felt the need to go out and share my story a bit more in the context of our culture. I love the description of the event that Jonathan made. That we're living in a world where atheism is on the rise, and a lot of things are just taking place in our world where you don't hear too many people talking about things of faith and religion. And it's not only that, like in our churches, we just have so many people who are basically functional atheists. So I just wanted to talk, briefly about why I'm doing this. I thought it was really important for me to talk about these things because because growing up, I really wasn't in a religious context, and and I see that in most churches today. That kids are in these churches, they don't really know why they're there, what they're there for, and so whenever they go out to colleges, they lose their faith. So I'm going to be speaking to three different type of people. I'm going to be speaking to Christians as parents, because parents, a lot of the stuff is going to be applicable to you because as you hear my story and you hear my testimony, the things that I go through, you might realize that I'm not really showing my child the things that he ought to know in the faith, if you understand what I'm saying. Then a second group of people I'm speaking to are Christians, young Christians who are my age. I'm 21 years old. I may not look it. A lot of people think that I'm 28, but I'm not. I'm 21 years old. Sadly, I'm probably a millennial or something. People don't really like millennials, but sadly, in our culture, we people who grow up in the church, or they don't grow up in church, and then once they get to college, to the universities, they might take a philosophy class or two. And in universities, it's predominantly atheists who are in philosophy departments. That's why I'm glad I have a good friend, Dr. BJ Rudge, who's in as a Christian teaching classes like that. Just a wonderful friend. But when I went to college, I had atheist philosophy professors, which was fun because I get to basically mess with him a little bit, because he thought I was always a Christian, but I wasn't. I became a Christian about 4 years ago. And the last group that I'm speaking to is atheists, obviously, because atheism today. I grew up and became an atheist probably about 14, 15 years old. And I listened to Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Dostoevsky, older guy. I listened to Dan Barker and Sam Harris. I loved Sam Harris. He was one of my favorites. He was a little bit nicer than most of the other atheists, but now I have some problems, obviously. I used to just listen to atheists, and found comfort in that. But I realized I was wrong in a lot of ways. In so many ways, I was absolutely wrong. And I want to just speak to atheists and just say, if you watch this video, I hope that you listen to my testimony. Just so that you know that there's a Christian out there who's experienced what you may have experienced, or understood some things that you may understand, or and you may be curious as to some of the reasons why I became a Christian. Um, I'm going to actually do a bunch of more videos besides this one of just giving my testimony, because I don't want just my testimony to be the thing that causes you to become a Christian. There are a lot of reasons besides reasons to become a Christian. A lot of good reasons to become a Christian. So I'm going to hit so many arguments that I hear that used to hit me as an atheist and explain why I don't find them reliable anymore. And this will be helpful to Christian parents and those of you who are young and young like me who are in school, because you may have heard things and they sound so good to you at the time, but they're not. I'm just going to be honest. I'm a very brutally honest guy. And if I sound snarky at times, I'm sorry. That's just my old atheism rubbing off on me. Because I don't know what it is about atheism. It tends to make you a bit more snarky. Just being honest. I don't just putting that out there. So I want to start with just my testimony. Before I start that, I want to read a couple verses real fast. As a Christian, I'm not going to leave us without the word. And as a pastor, I love to share the word. I want to share Psalms 14:1 for you. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. Alright, so this is Psalms 14:1. I'm not sharing that to just bash atheists. I mean, I think that the Word of God needs to hit you where it needs to hit you. And the Bible quite clearly calls atheism foolishness. I'm not doing this to attack you, atheists, if you're watching this. I'm not doing that to try to push you away. I'm doing that because I'm just talking about myself. I used to be foolish. I used to be silly. I used to be caught up in atheism. And what I want to say to you is this, that it's okay to admit when you're wrong on some issues. I had to do that. I had to let my pride go and admit that I was wrong. I had to let my pride go, and I had to actually look at what the other side was saying. As an atheist, I had to listen to theists. I had to listen to people who didn't have the same beliefs as I did. Okay, so that's where I'm hoping you and I can dialogue a little bit more. So, another verse that I want to read to provide some hope is 1 Corinthians 1 Corinthians 1 verse starting in verse 25. 1 Corinthians 1 verse starting verse 25. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things out of this world, to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. And that's what I want to share with you today, is that I was once foolish in my atheism, and now God has made me wise in understanding the truth. For the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I now believe the Word of God to be true. So let me just say this to you as well. Try to get rid of some of your presuppositions. Try to get rid of these things, and try to look at figure out what is the Christian worldview, because not many atheists really know that. So let me just start sharing my testimony so that maybe you can understand where I came from and where I'm now at. So when I was young, I grew up in a household, and I want to share kind of where I came from. most most atheists that I've met and talked to, they may have grown up in religious households, or allude to it, or allude to the fact that they grew, like Bill Maher, who says that he grew up in a Catholic household, or so on and so forth. That these things were a part of their lives. I didn't really grow up in I wouldn't really consider my household growing up a Christian household, because when I compare what the Word says versus what I grew up in, it doesn't really match up at all, if you understand what I mean. And also, my parents weren't particularly religious. I would say so to explain the context, I was born in Newcastle and then moved to Florida and spent a majority of my life in Florida before I was a Christian. And what happened, and my parents weren't going to church or anything like that. My dad, I would say he was more go with the flow type of guy. I call him a go with the flow type of bro. He loves to, he says, I believe in Jesus, but if you have Allah, if you have Buddha, if you have whatever floats your boat, kind of thing. All different ways lead to heaven. People just need to have their own religion. My dad says this still to today. Not correct, because Jesus says he is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. That kind of puts a damper on things. But my mom, she grew up Catholic. She was a Easter, Christmas Catholic. She would go, and I say she's an ECG Catholic. She would go when she's guilty sometimes. Easter, Christmas guilt. That's a joke that I typically use. But we didn't really grow up in a religious context. My parents would send me off to Sunday school when we were kids, little kid school, and we would paint pictures of Noah's Ark and things like that. Just that kind of thing. And I would always wonder, what's the Bible about? What's going on there? What's going on with this book that they keep telling me to read? But I didn't really know much about it. I didn't really know anything dealing with it. Like, in fact, here's a joke that I typically use. We all know the verse in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 13:4, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, and always perseveres. So we know that verse, and people typically use it at weddings. It's always at a wedding. So when I was young, I would try to find something like that and go, I would think the Bible was a bunch of pithy little sayings. I thought it was just a bunch of pithy little things that people would say. And when I looked at it, I was like, what does this have to do with weddings? And I would sit there and think, what does this have to do with weddings? So that's sort of my background. Also, another funny story is my parents. Most of my, not bashing my dad, but he showed us the Passion of the Christ, and I couldn't understand it. It was in a different language. I didn't feel like reading the subtitles of the whole movie. Cool story, bro. That's kind of like my deal with that. It got good. I was doing sit-ups behind the couch. I didn't care about the crucifixion of Jesus. I was just like, whatever, who cares? And my best friend, he got baptized and said, I can't swear anymore. I'm not able to swear because I got baptized. And I'm like, in my head, I was skeptical, going, all right, good for you, kind of thing. So those are the things before. So you're probably wondering what caused me to say definitively I'm an atheist, because it seemed like I grew up in an environment that was like, believe in some sort of God. But now I'm like, what caused me to say there is no God whatsoever? What caused me to take that position? So I'm going to share that today and share that a bit. So what happened was I moved to Newcastle around the year, I think, 2008, because that's when the Madden game was coming out. I remember everybody in school talking about it. I didn't know what they were talking about. But that's just something I use as a marker. Come in 2008, and I start going to school in Newcastle, and I'm already pretty upset with life because my best friend and I in Florida, his name's Dylan. We were supposed to go into sixth grade. We're supposed to go up to the middle school now. We were going up to the big school, and we were gonna play basketball together and pick up chicks and things like that. That was the plan, but it didn't turn out that way at all. I ended up moving. We moved a lot in Florida, and I just finally thought, okay, we're going to be in a school that I'm going to know, and I'm going to know people, and I'm going to know somebody, and it's going to be great. No, I end up moving to Newcastle, which one of the worst cities in western Pennsylvania, high drug rate, just so much stuff wrong with Newcastle. Like, there's nothing to do here. It's just so I move here not knowing anybody. I'm the new kid again. It's just, I don't want to deal with this garbage. And then I go there and I'm like, when are we going to move again? Kind of thing. But I'm also sitting there thinking about my start going through school, and I start getting bullied in school even more. I remember one kid pushed me in tax, and because I wasn't the most, I was a little bit poorer than a lot of the other kids. I didn't have Jordans or anything like that. I just, had what we had. And then I ended up going to so then when I went up to the high school, I was bullied a lot. I was bullied. I ate some more. Some kids were absolutely rude to me. So what really got me to start thinking about atheism was I had a friend who was a friend of my cousin's, and she was outrightly kind of atheist. And I started listening to some of the things she said, and they started making sense to me. But what really pushed me kind of over the edge was continually being bullied. And I was watching religious people in my school. People who were more religious, like, a lot of Catholics. So a lot of Catholics celebrated Lent. They would, the Ash Wednesday, would put ashes on their forehead, and they would, for 40 days, they would give up something like chocolate or whatever. I saw some religious hypocrisy. Like one of my friends, I love him to death, hilarious guy. His name's Dom. I asked him what he was giving up for Lent, and he'd say, "I'm giving up swearing." Aren't you supposed to do that anyway? My buddy, another guy who picked on me and bullied me, he said, I'm giving up chocolate. His name is Nick. I'm giving up chocolate for Lent or something like that. I forget what it was, but people were giving up all sorts of things, and I'm just like, whatever, who cares? What is this? Can you explain why? Nobody can really explain why they're doing it. It was just, that's what you do. I didn't participate, obviously, because I didn't know what's going on. I'm not Catholic. I don't know what's going on. So one of the things that intrigued me about all this was seeing religious people kind of give up what they're supposed to do, and then they would fall back and whatever. But this one kid, he was a bully, and I was like, God can't even change his own people. But then a tragedy kind of hit my life. I was really close to my grandfather, really close to him. I loved him to death, and he would take me, to flea markets and things like that. He would make chicken noodle soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. We would just have so much fun. We watched WWE wrestling all the time. I didn't even know he was sick, and then suddenly, he's in the hospital from my perspective, and he sounds like he's going to be all right, but he wasn't. He passed away. I still wear his wedding ring around my neck. So when he passed away, it was a bit rough on me, and I thought, so God just sends me to Newcastle, away from friends, away from things, and I'm here, Newcastle. I hate it here. I'm being bullied. I'm being picked on all the time. Punched, bloody nose, things just like that. I just hate it. Like, just mocking, ridicule. just wanting to be out of there. And the only good thing about being there was my grandmother and my grandfather, and my grandpa was my best friend, and he died. He got taken away from me, and and I was like, how could a good God let that happen? This is in that context again. And then the kid that I told you about who bullied me, Nick, I come back and my grandfather's dead and can't do anything about it, and he's picking on me and bullying me, and I say, man, not today. I remember saying, man, not today. Please don't, not today. And, he said, your grandfather died to get away from you. This is a religious person from my perspective. And he says, your grandfather died to get away from you. And that ripped my heart up. And then I saw more things happening. Then later on, my grandmother died a year later. Practically a year later, my grandmother dies. And then a girl that I had a crush on, this girl, she was, I liked her, I wanted to date her, all this fun stuff, and loved her to, wanted to be with her, because she always was with these awful guys, and she always was they're abusive. I was like, that song, I Can Treat You Better, that kind of feeling. And looking back wasn't a good idea, but I wanted something, and I asked. I remember doubting God's existence and going, can you give me one win? Please, just one win. I just one, please. My grandmother's dead. My grandfather's dead. Please, just one. My aunt has cancer. Just one win, please. And she stops dating this one guy, and I tell her my feelings and all this stuff. And then what happens a week later? She's dating another guy, kind of thing. And I'm just fed up with losing. I'm fed up with life. I'm fed up with this stuff. And I'm just fed up with the religious hypocrisy and the lack of really knowing what's true. And I got upset. And and this girl was the same girl kind of. And I said, maybe this atheism is true. And I remember railing against God. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. You're terrible. I hate you. And then it dawned on me. I know that some people have that idea, I was kind of like the reverse of the teacher from God's Not Dead. I was the reverse of that. Whenever he's like, I hate God, and then the kid says, how can you hate what doesn't exist? Right? And it was kind of like a turnaround. Except in my case, I was saying, hey, I hate God, I hate God, I hate God. And then I say, how can I hate what doesn't exist? And that's when I fully said, okay, maybe this atheism is a thing. So then when I was at school, I started looking up atheism, and I started listening to Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, all these guys. I just remember them saying things just made me feel comfortable. They used to say things like, you're part of the universe. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who really doesn't come out as an atheist, he would just kind of say whatever. He would he's kind of like agnostic type thing, but he would say you're part of the universe and it's a great thing. And then I said they would say things, you could be an atheist and be moral and do good things, and I would say yeah that's true. I do good things. I get good grades in school. I don't need God to do that. I don't need God to do anything right. And then I would think things like evolution is true, and that's what's taught in school, and it seems like that leads to, I never realized what they said, that evolution means that there's no God, because you don't really need God. So I'm like, oh, great, okay, got more reasons up my belt. And I would hear Richard Dawkins saying, he's like, you are the author of your life, and you get to do it. It felt a little bit more empowering, right? But then I read quotes that made me kind of iffy, but I would say, no, this atheism thing is true, because how could a God let bad things happen to good people? How could a good God let bad things happen to me? Those are things that I thought as an atheist. And yeah, so if you're an atheist watching this later on or something, I feel for you if you've been through tough situations. I understand that. I feel for it. But I learned that's not an excuse, and I'll explain more why later in other videos. But I just that was the area that I was in, and then I realized. Then I took atheism to its logical conclusion with nihilism, realizing that without God, there's no real reason to be angry at things. There's no real reason to call things wrong. Like when that kid bullied me in school, he would, he said things to me like, your grandfather died to get away from you. Those types of things that just broke my heart. But I realized, how can I call that wrong? How can I call that? And I realized, like, atheism is true, but I would say, I can't really get mad at him. He's just doing what he wants to do that makes him happy. And if that means hurting me, then that's fine, I guess. That's up to him. And it was just constant depression. Another aunt died, and another aunt died. And, and I went through depression. I went through sadness because I watched things in my family kind of fall apart. I was... I saw like my dad. He's gotten sicker, and or even more sick. He's went through kidney stones and all this just bad stuff for him. And then my mom with some of her mental issues, and was friends with a girl who was raped and went through a lot of tough stuff, and I just see all this darkness around me, and I just say, well, what's the point of life? What's the point of life? I had a lot of allergies too, so couldn't really eat a lot of food other people can eat. I didn't have a lot of things. Like, I was kind of like in a woe is me kind of state, and I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have this, and so I became really depressed, and remember trying to even in my own life at one point. And, it was by the grace of God that I didn't. I tell you all this so that you can know me a bit better. So, all these things happen in my life. And you're probably thinking, okay, this guy became a Christian because some Christian came along and said, you have a Jesus-shaped hole in your heart. You're probably thinking that's what happened. That's actually not what happened. What ended up happening was a girl who, my parents didn't really like. She ended up bringing me to a youth group kind of thing. And I didn't tell anybody anything. I didn't really deal with that. And the pastor, who's now my fellow pastor now, this was a year before I even started going to the church. This is when he was a youth pastor. I started going. The people were really nice. This is the first time I met some really nice Christians. Because most of the Christians I met were hypocrites. And Pastor Craig and Craig List were two guys that just seemed really genuine. Molly, Craig's wife, was a really genuine person, and I could see that, along with a church member of mine, Darcy. I love her to death, and I could just see that, just genuineness in their lives. And when I went there, I just they were doing stuff on prayer, and I didn't believe in prayer. I still have a hard time praying sometimes as a former atheist. I still struggle with that. But what ended up happening was what ended up happening was they were all talking about prayer, and Craig was, talking about the importance of prayer, and how sometimes we pray with so much effort and it has no power and things like that. And I'm just like sitting there kind of like, I really don't know what you're talking about, dude, but all right, whatever kind of thing. And they're all praying in a circle. And at first I pretend to pray, and I put my head down, and then I just lift my head up and just start watching everybody pray, because I'm not praying. I'm an atheist. This is silly. But it got me out of the house for a second. And I was nice because I didn't want anybody to know I was an atheist. I was a closet atheist because I saw kids in school putting out their atheism and being kind of mean. And I just kind of thought, I don't really need to put this out. I can pretend to be a Christian. What's the harm in that? It just makes it makes it a little bit easier. So I go there, and I leave, and I don't actually come back. I don't actually come back because my parents ended up wanting to go somewhere else. We ended up in a Mormon church one time. It was really weird. Not trying to bash Mormons. I have Mormon friends, but I think it's false teaching, obviously. But I'm not gonna. But whenever I talked about whenever. It was just all weird because when I was an atheist and things like that. The only reason I wanted to go back is there's a cute girl there that was a little bit flirtatious with me, but it's besides the point. So going out of this, I just it was the end of my sophomore year in high school, and I heard in what Craig, my fellow pastor, said was ringing in my ears about prayer, we pray without expecting God to give an answer kind of thing. And I was like, maybe that's sort of where I started just getting me thinking a little bit. And it was the end of my sophomore year, and I didn't want anything, I didn't want to have a boring summer. I didn't want to have a bad summer. That was my idea. I didn't want to have a bad summer vacation. And what ended up happening next was I just ended up saying, I'm going to give this prayer thing a shot. If it works, whatever. If it doesn't, then I have more reasons to be an atheist. Was my thought. More reasons to be an atheist. So then I prayed. I said, God, just give me something to do during the summer. Just give me something. I was expecting to get into an AP history class at the time and didn't end up getting into it. There was only so many spaces available, and I just wasn't able to get into it. That's fine. It happens. But the teacher, he was one of my favorite teachers, Mr. Shaftick. He was my cross-country coach, too. But I thought he was going to call me to the office and say I was in his AP class because I wanted to be, because I had him for world history when I was young. But he invited me to his class, and he said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. I was like, oh, is it about the AP history class? And he goes, no, I did. Did you sign up for it? I'm like, I think I did. I was hoping I'd get into it. And he goes, well, I didn't see you there, but if so, that'd be great. But he says, I really wanted to invite you to run cross country for me. So I was like, really? Sure, I'll run cross country. I guess I have to now. But I ran cross country. It was nice, and I just thought, well, it must be just a coincidence. That was sort of like my idea. It's just a coincidence. Things like crazy stuff happen all the time. Whatever. So then I ended up going to cross country for a couple months, and ended up doing really well in cross country and enjoying it myself. And it was during the summer, and I had fun. And but then what ended up happening was I just ended up becoming I just ended up dating this one girl and I'm just going to be absolutely honest about where I was at. I ended up dating this one girl, and opportunities presented themselves, and I said that I was a Christian to win over her mom's approval. And I even convinced her I was or Christian, but I was an atheist. And I said, I can lie. There's no room. It's just finding out what suits you kind of thing. And I said, I don't do bad things. It's just a small lie, I used to think. And then I ended up getting into sinful things with her, having sexual intercourse with her, and things like that. And then after we broke up, she was kind of abusive. There was bad things going on. It was just a real train wreck, and my life felt like garbage afterwards. But I was still running cross country, and I was still loving it. I was still enjoying it. I found a lot of peace in running. But then the same girl who invited me to youth group said, "Why don't you come to church with me?" This is a girl you wouldn't expect to ask you to come to church with you. So I said, and this is when Craig started the house church. My fellow pastor, Craig Cole, started the house church. If you ever see me online or something, it's with my fellow pastor Craig. I do his Theology 101 videos, and our What I Wish I Learned in Sunday School videos. You should check them out. But he was starting the church, and it was great. He started this church, and when I went, the people were very kind-hearted. It was wonderful. Like, I actually just liked being around the people. I thought it was awesome. But what really hit me with what Craig did was they were starting to go through 2 Peter, or 1 Peter. 1 Peter. It was the first book of the Bible I ever read. But they were starting to go through 1 Peter. And what hit me about it was they were a church teaching the Bible. And I was like, I never learned how to read the Bible. Like, I thought it was a bunch of pithy little things, but they're going through it verse by verse in this. And I said, I'm an atheist. I'm not going to say anything, but I've never actually read the Bible before. I've never actually understood how to read it. I don't know what the 1 Corinthians means or 2 Corinthians means or things like that. I don't know what 1 Peter, 2 Peter, all that is. Maybe I thought like President Trump, 2 Corinthians walk into a bar or something. But that's about it. I didn't really know much. So then I learned how to read the Bible. I actually learned how to read it through listening to Craig teach 1 Peter. Right? And I learned, there's a context. There's a historical context. There's a who, what, when, where, and why to this. That this isn't a particular time period. This is like, this book isn't a bunch of pithy little sayings. Like, wow, it's pretty amazing. And what ended up hitting me even more about this was that Craig said, they were doing a Wednesday night Life of Christ class, and I was like, wow, a Life of Christ class. I said, the only thing I know about Jesus is the Passion of the Christ movie. That's about it. That's all I know. And so I said, I'm going to commit to going on Wednesday nights. On Wednesday, I can skip running for a day to learn who Jesus is. If I'm an atheist, I'm going to want to know what's going on. Like, I don't believe in miracles. I don't believe in that, but maybe there might be something here, I thought. So I go there, and I said, I'm going to commit, since I know there's a context of the Bible, I'm going to commit myself to reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I start doing that. I start doing it in the King James, which is really tough to do, something when you're first starting out. So I remember, my church buying me my first Bible. It was a Life Application Study Bible. I still love this thing. Of course, I study other things besides. Like, I don't even really look at my notes anymore in this thing. Sometimes I do, just for some things, but I mostly use other commentary now that I'm a pastor. But what I loved was just, wow, I'm finally learning the Word. I'm finally learning about this stuff, and then learning the Life of Christ stuff was amazing. I learned about going from beginning to end, how to read the Bible, like how things worked out chronologically. And then Craig List gave me a book, Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. Because I admitted, like, I was an atheist. I admitted that I didn't really believe in this stuff, but I want to know more. So he gives me this book, Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ, and Lee Strobel was, and what intrigued me about this was he was an atheist who became a Christian, and I was like, oh, I need to know why. I need to understand why. I need to figure out what's going on with his life. So then I learned so much about why Christianity is true. I learned all the evidence for the resurrection. I learned all the evidence for the Bible being true, like all the manuscript stuff. I learned different Christian apologists. So I started watching their videos, and then I found out some of these guys debated some of the atheists that I loved, and they actually had good points. They actually had reasonable points. Dr. William Lane Craig, he was one of those guys that had reasonable faith. If you want to look into him, one of those guys that really helped me out. Then there was Ravi Zacharias, who did. I learned about him and started studying him. The Lee Strobel book just gave me so much stuff. Bruce Metzger, I started studying things with him and just realizing, wow, Christianity is true. It's true. Steve Burchett, a fellow pastor friend of mine, he showed us a video called E Tau. It's true, and I just remember realizing that this stuff has reason to it. There's a reason to believe that Jesus Christ is who he is. And I'm going to get into more of that later as I start talking about common objections to Christianity from atheists in later videos. But I remember that I don't know the exact point when I just was a Christian, because God changed my heart. He regenerated my heart. He changed my heart and soul. He gave me a new heart that was bent towards him. I don't know I can't place a point where I said, I'm a Christian now. If I have to put a point, I would say maybe the day before my baptism. I finally just realized that either it's because Craig explained baptism, what it was meant for, and things like that. And I remember saying, okay, it's either I have to follow Jesus as Lord or not. And I was like, this stuff is true, so I have to follow the truth. And when I got baptized, I'm just going to say this. There's no special change. There's no just God. It was just a declaration that I'm His. That God has saved me. It was a public declaration, and I still love my baptism. Still love that Craig at my baptism. I still remember him teaching on the parable of the soils and things like that. Just it was good, but now I'm a Christian, and I became a pastor at my church about a year ago. And I've just been studying. I read a good portion of the Bible. I'm still hankering to study more about who God is. And now I went to Slippery Rock, and I debated my atheist professor about every week on atheism and Christianity. I've read so many of Richard, now that I was able to, I read so many of Richard Dawkins' books and Christopher Hitchens, and I'm very sad because Christopher Hitchens is one of my favorites. But I read Letter to a Christian Nation, and I'm able to dismantle it. I'm probably going to end up doing so in the future. But one of the things, and I love going out and sharing the gospel. I evangelize to people constantly, and part of my tool is to say, I was once an atheist, and now I'm a pastor. And to say to them, I was once an atheist, and I didn't believe in God, now I believe in God. And you'll be surprised how many people are like, oh, okay, I need to hear this guy. But but there are just so many Christians in my life now who have made such an impact on me. Jonathan Ruiz, we went to Guatemala, and I'm going to talk about a story later on when we talk about miracles. I want to do a 2-part thing on miracles because I think that's a very contentious issue, and I'm going to actually give a good argument for miracles in the future. But Jonathan has been a great guy in my life. Pastor Craig Cole has been wonderful to me. Then I listened to some great teachers, and these are guys you might just want to look into, and they probably don't even know that I'm saying this, but they definitely would know now. Dr. James White, amazing guy. If you want to know why the scriptures are true, study some of his things. Dr. Vadi Bakum, he talks about, he has a teaching online, why I believe the Bible, why I chose to believe the Bible. Great teaching on it. Very condensed understanding of it. Dr. David Wood, who has a very similar testimony to me. He was an atheist and he became a Christian, and now he's a Christian apologist. I'm not at his level, but I hope to be one day, to be on his level of keen debating and being able to discuss issues. Like he's a very wonderful guy. Todd Friel. Todd Friel is another from Wretched Radio. Love the man. I lost a girlfriend over one of his videos. Thank God. And then Dr. John MacArthur has taught me how to read the Bible because if it wasn't for his ministry, he wouldn't have. My fellow pastor probably wouldn't have been teaching. My fellow pastor probably would not have been teaching expository Bible preaching and teaching, which then wouldn't have led me to reading the Bible, and then which wouldn't have led me to becoming a Christian, which wouldn't have led me to begin. So God uses so many things in so many ways, and and I just pray for these men. So look up Wretched, Alpha and Omega Ministries, Dr. John MacArthur. At Grace to You, Dr. Phil Johnson. Many of these guys are just wonderful men in my eyes. Dr. William Lane Craig with Reasonable Faith. Ravi Zacharias with Ravi Zacharias International. Just look up some of these guys. Dr. David Wood at Acts 17 Apologetics. If you're what I want you to take away from this as a person. So as I wrap this up, what I want you to take away from this, if you're a Christian parent, is as an atheist who became a Christian, I was never taught the Word. I was never taught taught how to read the Word, to study the Word. Do that with your children. Please do that with your children. Read the Word with them. Study the Word with them. Even take the time to understand opposing views. That way you can explain them to your children. Their souls are at stake. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking in the church. This is me being pastoral now and saying, you need to go out into the world and go into your children's lives and preach the gospel to them every single day. Show them love, show them joy, care for them. Another thing I want to share with you is also, don't be lazy with your children. Please don't do that. Because they're going to go off to the universities and hear arguments, hear things, and they don't know how to combat them. I was the only, as an atheist, who became a Christian by the grace of God alone. I was in a class with 30 students, and my atheist professor, was going through something that would make it look like Christianity is false. And these kids, I was the only one who knew how to answer these objections. Please, go through these things. Teach your children. Find resources. Do everything in your power, because what's more important than on that last day when you're standing before Christ and Him saying to you and your children, "Well done, good and faithful servant." To young Christian men and women who are off to college, who are in high school, wherever your context is, don't rely on your parents. Don't rely, if your parents aren't teaching you, don't rely on it. You need to take it up yourself to learn. You need to understand the scriptures yourself. Your soul's at stake. If you're a young person who believes in Christianity but doesn't, it just, trust me, you can take time to study these things. Don't get rattled. And another thing I was going to say, don't get rattled if atheistic arguments come at you. Don't get shaken up by these things. And lastly, to atheists, I know probably all of you are going to watch, some of you are going to watch this video and think some guy's staring into the camera telling his testimony. What I want you to know is this. I have reasons for my faith. And I'm more than willing to share them with you. I'm more than willing to discuss them with you. I'm more than willing to debate. I've been in a couple different debates with atheists, interviews, things like that. But what I want to tell you is this. Try to go a little bit deeper in understanding who God is. Because I'm going to talk about this in the future, but I think what atheism tends to do is to show, what atheism tends to do is creates a straw man of who God is and then tears it down. That's one of the biggest things. So what I really hope for you is that, and please continue to watch these videos. The next 2 weeks, I'm going to talk about a really tough issue. I'm going to talk about miracles. One, the main understanding of miracles is, if the greatest miracle that occurred is true, the creation of the universe is true, then anything else is possible. And another thing I want to say is that, and it's a little sneak peek, is if Christ was raised from the dead and He's God, then that is a miracle. And if it's verifiable historically, then all other miracles are possible. And I'm just going to say this too. I'm not going to pick on just atheists. I'm going to pick on Christians. I'm going to pick on other Christians throughout this whole thing, because atheists, I think you'll love that. If you're an atheist out there, I think you'll love this, because I'm going to be honest about some of the things that I see in modern day Christianity. And I'm going to be honest by saying this. There are some false things out there. There are some tough things out there. And I want to help you discern what's true, what's false, what I've learned. Maybe it might be helpful, maybe it won't. But I just say this with love, and that try to find out whether or not you're wrong. Try to find that out, because if you're right, then it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go to heaven if you're right. I'm just living my life how I see fit, and this just seems like a nice thing for me to do. But if you're wrong, there's a lot of consequences to that. I'm not trying to use Pascal's argument as a way as proof, but I'm saying Pascal's argument is a good way of thinking about the situation that you may be in. I love you all. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that continue to do this every week. It may not be at the same time, but if you see it online, I'm going to put it on YouTube the same day, and send this to your friends, send this to atheists, send this to whoever. See if it helps them out, and but just be ready for what I teach you. All right. God bless you all. If this is long, I apologize, but hope you guys have a wonderful day. And if you're watching this and stuff, feel free to message me on Facebook or something. If you're an atheist running like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, I'm always open for debate, and Also, check out the Hope Movement. It's a great ministry with my friend Jonathan, and I'm going to talk about some of the stories that Jonathan and I have been a part of. And if you're a Spanish speaker, please, and you don't have a lot of theology, check out Jonathan's Theologia 101, because he puts sound teaching into Spanish for you, and it's pretty awesome. He's taking theology from different sources, like John MacArthur's systematic theology, and also a theology course that we did a year ago in our church, and he's putting it in a way for you to understand. So please check those things out. Check out discipleshipcommunitychurch.net. That's my church. So I hope if there's anything that can help you, I'm ready to serve. God bless you all, and hope you guys have a great and wonderful day.